name is Russ Johnson. I was Darren's neighbor for a long time. I live with Justin Saller, who many more of you know, because he's like Santa Claus, except everywhere he goes, he brings honey from his beehives. Needless to say, he is much more popular than I am. It often seems that in this world, most people don't know their neighbors, much less they would go out their way to help them. However, I have learned that in the town of Waynesville, being a neighbor still means something. No one embodied that fact more than Darren and Jan. Darren was not that much older than me, but he had much more experience. Some of it learned the hard way. Because of that, he also had much more wisdom. He was very open about his struggles and the situations he had found himself in. Never to brag or impress you, but always with the intention that maybe if he shared, it would help you in some way. As I talk about my interactions with Darren, it will become obvious that he lived to help others. And for those of you that knew him, I'm sure that you can attest to that as well. Justin and I moved in next door to Darren and Jan when I was 22 and Justin was 24. It was Justin's first house and the first house that either of us had ever been responsible for. It's on 40 acres with 2 barns and a house that was in functional condition but needed some work. Needless to say, we were in over our heads. As we met Darren and Jan, they began to call us the kids. I imagine they had a lot of conversation. There was some variation of Jan asking Darren what the kids were up to, and him responding that they were hitting X with a hammer, so I brought them the right tool. Or they were hitting Y with a hammer, so I showed them the right way to do it. You're noticing a pattern where it was Justin and I hitting things with a hammer and Darren coming and bailing us out. If you remember the old Superman shows, Superman could hear cries for help from miles away. He would rush out to rescue whoever was in need. I think Darren might have had a superpower for knowing when people were in need of help. For us, that was the sound of the hammer hitting something it was most certainly not supposed to. Unfailingly, Darren would show up, and in the nicest, most polite way, suggest that he had been there before, and maybe there was another thing we should try. My brother Randy also had the fortune of meeting Darren. We were reminiscing earlier this week about another time Darren had helped us out. I had shot a deer and it had taken off, and by the time I had started tracking it, it had started to rain. It was a miserable cold rain, but it was quickly ruining our tracking trail, so we had to push through and attempt to recover this deer. We're complaining, walking with our heads down, hands in our pockets, soaked, cold, and hungry, wondering why we even bother with this hunting thing at all when the grocery store has plenty of stuff down the street. Eventually we look up, and sure enough, here comes Darren. From his warm, dry house, slogging through the fields, he spends hours helping us search for his deer. My brother Randy looks at me and said, "Who does it?" Darren shows up positive, upbeat, and optimistic that we get the job done. Not that it's the important part of that story, but we did find that deer. It was clear to me then that if Darren saw someone he cared about suffering, he would never be the one to feel bad and give you words of comfort. He would gear up, be right there beside you, equally as miserable, doing anything he could to ensure that he shouldered more than his share of the burden on your behalf. My last story about Darren, I promise. Justin and I ran that bachelor pad next to Darren for a long time. It was often the refuge of husbands and fathers who needed a place where they could hang out with no responsibilities or expectations. Sometimes it was a place to vent about a never-ending honey-do list, a child who isn't sleeping or teething, or any other stressful situation they found themselves in. Sometimes when Jan was shopping or running errands, Darren would stop by and hang out with us. Never once did he have a complaint about Jan. It was clear that he adored her. Often one of our visitors would get a call to head home, and you could see the weight of it returned to them, their responsibilities they needed to pick back up and execute. Sometimes they would even miss a call or two because the service in Waynesville is really bad before they would pick up and head home. Every time Darren got a call from Jan, he was in a rush to pick it up. You could see him light up when he talked to her, and heading home to see her was obviously a highlight of his day and of his life. We met Darren a couple times before we ever met Jan. As he shared his story, it became obvious that he had been through a lot. I often wondered what had gotten him through so many challenges and situations that many are not able to overcome. He also never seemed to need a break or a chance to vent about something he was going through. Justin and I, being single, wondered if a marriage such as that really existed. And then we met Jan, and it started to become clear. Soon after, we tasted Jan's cooking, and it was glaringly obvious. Darren, somehow on a gluten-free, low-sugar, nonsense diet, was still eating like a king. It was evident that Jan was not just a major part of Darren's world, she was his world. Their marriage, friendship, partnership, and support system has been a great influence to me in my marriage, my brother to his, and likely to many of you as well. To wrap this up, Darren has been a great neighbor, friend, husband, family man, mentor, helper, son, and role model. Whatever comes after this life, I hope to find him again and set up shop right next door. I hope to again be his and Jan's neighbor. And I know there are many of you who feel the same way. So this is me officially calling dibs.